Chinese Americans are coming to China in increasing numbers, some 30 years after their parents made the reverse journey to America. Why is that? Is it a pragmatic response to economic woes? Is it a search for identity? Or is it something more? Growing up in the suburbs of Chicago, I self-identified as Chinese American. But since coming to Beijing, I might simply say I'm American. So why does identity morph across waters? Today, we'll explore this phenomenon. I'll sit down with fellow expatriate Chinese Americans and get their stories on why they've chosen to live and work in Beijing. And speak with Professor Li of Beijing Foreign Studies University, whose recent study examined what it means to be Chinese American in China and how does identity transform. As we explore this issue in more detail, we'll ask, what has been their experience since arriving in China, and has it differed from their expectations? How has this impacted their understanding of what it means to be Chinese American? And what will their futures hold against the backdrop of a rising China?
The Chinese began immigrating to the U.S. during the 19th century in several waves, most notably in the mid-1800s during the California Gold Rush, when male Cantonese laborers faced with hardships in southern China were lured abroad by job opportunities. Chinese made up two-thirds of the labor force that built the Transcontinental Railroad. In spite of the indispensable role they played in the development of the American West, they were heavily discriminated against and exploited. Numerous anti-Chinese movements emerged, and in 1882, the U.S. Congress singled out Chinese migrants with the Chinese Exclusion Act, effectively banning the immigration of laborers from China for nearly 60 years, and preventing those already there from participating in a wide variety of jobs. Chinese Americans eventually settled in areas that became known as Chinatowns in major cities. The mid-1970s ushered in an era of increased immigration, after annual quotas were raised significantly under the 1965 Immigration Act. The vast majority of those arriving in the U.S. during this period came from Hong Kong and Taiwan. Recent waves, however, have been made up of those from mainland China, many of whom are wealthy and well-educated. Now Chinese Americans constitute 1.2% of the U.S. population, or around 3.6 million, making Cantonese, the local Guangdong dialect, the third most widely spoken non-English language in the country. Public perception typecast Chinese Americans as a model minority. The media frenzy surrounding Amy Chua's controversial book, Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother, further enforced this stereotype. Although as a whole, Chinese Americans are less politically active than other minority groups, they are becoming more influential, due in no small part to their inextricable links to China. Many speculate that the recent appointment of Gary Locke, the first Chinese American to serve as U.S. ambassador to China, will likely provide a further bridge between the two countries.
But more importantly, to build a positive, cooperative, and comprehensive relationship that both President Obama and President Hu aspire to.
So we kind of actually avoided the subject about China until I got here, and then my dad was like, what are you doing in China? I went from Guangdong, I fled to Hong Kong and made a life in Hong Kong so I can move to New York, and, flew your mom over, and, we gave you a great education and a great home, and now you're going back to the place that and so he has that thought, and it's understandable why. Yeah, the land of opportunity, right? That's their generation.
There's no question that China has become a land of opportunity. For these four Chinese Americans, life in China has opened a host of new possibilities.
What's your real name?
Yeah, what's your real name?
Hi, my name is Kristen. I'm 27 years old and I'm from California. For the past 4 years, I've been doing PR, marketing events. I've done everything from plan weddings to plan fashion shows and restaurant openings, club openings. I've kind of done a lot of really cool things. One of my first projects was with the Hatsune Restaurant Group, where I opened their last two restaurants in Sallington Village right before and after the Olympics. So that was during a really exciting time in Beijing. And to open, two of the most successful restaurants, I think, in Beijing is a great, is something I'm super proud of.
Oh, you've never heard banana?
No, it's her Irish.
My name is Jeff. I'm 36 years old, and I've been living in Beijing for 2 years, and I'm a photographer. I've covered a lot of subjects, not just in China, but in Asia as well, and I've done work for CNN, Wall Street Journal, The Guardian, and a few other magazines. I'm originally from New York City, born and raised.
The episode name.
My name is Diane, and I'm 21 years old. I'm from New York City, Brooklyn specifically. I work at, my boss was the owner of an international stamp company. We print and design, and we are the agents for different postal authorities throughout the world. We have about 50 different countries under our wing. But he's branching off into collectibles like, you know, stamps, of course, coins, gold.
I'm nervous.
Don't be nervous.
He's pretending it's a giant eye. My name is Edwin. I'm from New York. I grew up in Queens. I went to school in Brooklyn. 25. Going to be 26 in December. I've been in Beijing for about 10, 11 months now. I'm an architect. One of the current projects I'm working on is a church in Ningbo that we had to design a nunnery. Another project right now that I'm working on is a competition for a museum in Shandong.
Wait, let's establish something here. Every one of us are second generation Chinese?
Yeah.
So all of our parents are immigrants here? My mom is, okay. So I guess that plays a role because that kind of defines how Chinese you were raised.
Yeah,
If your parents were already born here.
It's kind of funny because growing up, I always thought of my family as being super Chinese, especially my mom, because when I was younger, I'm a little embarrassed to say this, but I remember growing up, every time, you know, I had my friends with me, and we'd get my mom's car, and she'd drive us home from school, and she'd be playing, you know, Chinese pop songs in the car. I'd be like, oh my God, Mom, can you please, like, put on the radio instead? And I would be super embarrassed. Or when she would speak to me in Chinese, I would always kind of reply in English, and I didn't really want to, you know, speak it back to her, which is, you know, such a shame because I think that my Chinese right now would be so much better if I actually, you know, really spoke the language at home.
And you know, like how like they always say, "Hey, do you want to go to Chinese school? Do you want to learn how to read or write?" And then you're like, "No," right?
Yeah.
I got such a
Now
Chinese
I'm like,
school,
why didn't I go? But anything simple or conversational, you could just do it. You could just say it, right?
Yeah, but then it's also like what your mom says to you over like the past 20 years of your life. It's all the same. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
have you eaten yet? Are you cold?
Yeah.
Did you-
Yeah.
It's
It's all
very
like, and it's
simple
all home
conversation.
stuff, right?
It's like I'm like an 8-year-old. So it's not very great. It's enough to get by, have basic conversation.
You know, everyone says my Chinese is really good in the States. Everybody. And so when I get here, people are like, where are you from, you know? And
The Chinese is
every time I
awful.
get that, I'm like, the first thing, every time someone's like, oh, 你是哪里人? And I'm like, 我是中国人.
Oh, I used to say that too.
I
And
say
they'd be
that.
like, no, you're not.
No, they're like that. They're like that wasn't the question. They're like that wasn't the question. I didn't ask, you know, what kind of person you are. I asked where you're from. And I'm like, you know, and I get really annoyed because it's like I'm Chinese. You know, I think that's all you need to know. And if you say, oh, I'm American, they'll be like, no, you look Chinese. You're Chinese. What are you talking about? You're Chinese. You know. And it doesn't matter where you're from. It doesn't matter where you're from. You look Chinese, you are Chinese, you have to, it's expected of you. And it's, you know, you are held to even a higher level because you have received better education. Your parents raised you Chinese and your ideals and morals are supposed to be like 50 times better. So there's that part. There's no forgiveness here for Chinese Americans, especially young people, because you're expected to be on a higher level than the other Chinese kids. Yeah, it is a very double standard.
No, but see, this is the same thing as like, you know, when we're in the States and somebody goes, you know, where are you from?
Yeah, you say China.
Right? No.
don't say
Well, I don't know what you
never
say.
say that.
Well, like, you know, on the East Coast, right? Like, most of the time we usually say, we're like, I'm from Queens.
Yeah, for me.
You know, she's from Brooklyn, you know, like, but then, and then they go, no. Where are you from? And you're like, I'm from Queens.
Yeah. Yeah, like I know that question. It happens all. The worst is when they ask like, "What's your real name?" And that makes me so upset. Like, my name is Diane. No, what's your real name? You know, it's like, what do you mean?
But see, that's the thing. So switching it over, right? Now it's become completely different. Because now instead of saying like, oh no, I'm from New York, I'm from the States, we all feel compelled to say, no, I'm from China, or I'm Chinese. So there is something that's kind of switched now. Because now we're trying to identify more with like, no, I'm Chinese, I'm like you.
Right. Okay.
So I mean, it is, you know,
It's
kind of
funny
interesting.
Issues of identity are central to the Chinese-American question, a fact further explored by Professor Jingzhao Li of Beijing Foreign Studies University.
Professor Li researched the identity transformation and reconstruction of Chinese Americans living and working in China.
The other thing that brings my identity study unique is these different dimensions that I'm applying in identity studies. Not racial identities, not ethnic identities, but diaspora identities, and more specifically this citizen dimension and the host culture dimension of their diasporic identity.
To explore these aspects, she conducted 45 to 75-minute interviews with over 100 Chinese Americans. The survey portion included questions probing their awareness of U.S. citizenship and similarities with locals.
We'll share some of her findings and hear more from Chinese Americans after break.